Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, December 28th, 2016. I am less prepared than usual, I think, to do today's show. I don't know. It's the semi-vacation week, kids being home and everything else, though, working as normal. Most people, of course, at work. My wife out the door at work early today, but all kinds of errands and other things to take care of, running around. Kids want something to do, want to sit around and complain that they're bored. I don't know. It's a wacky week. Plus, of course, we have Greg Dworkin's schedule change. We're getting screwed by real life, real work. Greg won't be with us for the balance of the week, which is a tough thing to take. But on top of that, his schedule changes going forward, and, we'll be able to fit in 2 to 3 visits a week still, which is fantastic. We'll take what we can get, of course, but real life sometimes intrudes, and we've had a nice honeymoon that has lasted quite a while, and I guess we should be thankful for that. Okay, and we are, and we're thankful for everybody who's with us this morning, Bill in Portland, Maine included. Not like I was ever going to exclude him, but I see his morning tweet faithfully appearing right here for us to read at 9 o'clock. Daily Coast Radio is live. That's the purpose of this announcement and this tweet. Kagro X, that's me. David Waldman proposes an easy way to stop Trump from firing off nukes. Pee on the fuses. That's right. God damn it, I'd piss on a spark plug if I thought it would do any good. How old are we? War Games. Okay, what is that, a 1982 movie? 83? When did War Games come out? Somebody check that for me. Production assistant, get on that for me. Many things going on, of course. Also trying to arrange an afternoon a lunch. Hi, Alan. How you doing? I know my cousin Alan is very frequently a listener to the show, although this week, he usually listens on his way to work via podcast on the West Coast. But he's visiting and is in, nearby, anyway, on the East Coast today, and trying to arrange a quick meet for lunch with the family. But, of course, we're doing that by text during the show. So I could read you all the texts, but that won't be very interesting. Well, let's see. Yeah, good suggestion also from Bill. Shouldn't we have Armando fill in for Greg? We probably should, although I understand the last couple of weeks Armando has, I don't know whether he's been busy on top of it all, but a couple of times he's had comments to make, and then he said either his Skype wasn't working, or he wasn't at home, or didn't have things set up. So I don't know. It's a little difficult to know. But yeah, we'll open the door for that, certainly. And maybe it's a sign that we ought to begin working harder to try to entice some of the other either Daily Coast editors or regular listeners, perhaps. Maybe people who are here every morning anyway might like to chime in once in a while. It's worked out very well in the past, and occasionally it even gets people to catch the podcasting bug themselves. So we'll see. I'm in no position to start planning now. We're just in that holiday fog, and yeah, still something still affecting me here. I must be on like the verge of a cold or something. Could be the crazy weather, but just can't clear things up quite right. And I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that Donald Trump is set to become president very shortly. That could be it, certainly. Look at this. Here's some gun fail news, which I'll have to retweet and put aside for later. But another of the faithful gun fail watchers who very frequently picks up on actually a lot of the weirder accidents and road rage stories. That seems to be a specialty. Maybe you want to follow along. It's a person tweeting under the handle of SF DB. We'll read that out for you. It's South Florida SF Daily Blog DB. And this is, of course, as the profile states, the retired owner-operator of the South Florida Daily Blog and stuck on the Palmetto. Anyway, a very keen follower of the gun situation. Doesn't quite stick to the same parameters I do about the accidents, but just sort of fascinated with, frequently I get tweets from him of our NRA world is how they're usually sort of subtitled, and this one, no different, our NRA world. An Indiana grandpa teaching grandson gun safety negligently shoots him, using the negligently formulation rather than the accidental formulation that I prefer. But for purely personal reasons, let's check in on that one. I'm just sort of curious. This out of Campbellsburg, Indiana. Indiana is kind of a gun fail hotbed these days as well. Washington County Police called to a home in the, do you care? 6900 block of North Star Road. There's 2 R's in Star. In Campbellsburg, if you're in the neighborhood. After the report of an accidental shooting on Tuesday, and of course that was the day after Christmas. I suspect that a lot of the gun fail that happens in the very few days immediately following Christmas is due to people unfamiliar with their new guns that they got for Christmas. We've already had one confirmed Christmas gift shooting. That news came in yesterday, and from out of Ohio, the deplorable belt, Ohio, Indiana. Like I said, hotbed of gun fail activity, just like the Deep South. And I've had more than one person following along on Twitter insisting that most of these things are going to be happening in areas dominated by Donald Trump in the polls. I don't know that we can tie it quite that closely, but there's certainly some correlation. Anyway, when police arrived at 1:19 p.m., had they arrived at 1:18 p.m., who knows what they might have found, but at 1:19, they found a 12-year-old boy had been accidentally shot by his grandfather, 47-year-old Herbert Haar of Indianapolis, who I guess had made his way out to Campbellsburg to shoot his grandson. That's nice to keep the family together. 47-year-old grandfather. Well, I mean, it's... Well, that's not not what you're usually thinking of when it comes to having a 12-year-old grandson, but I don't know what the family situation is there. And who knows? Anyway, who cares? According to police, Haar and the boy had been shooting firearms at his cousin's home prior to the accident happening. When they finished practicing, Haar was attempting to teach his grandson gun safety. That was the perfect time to start teaching your grandson gun safety, after you've finished firing guns, not before. Okay, he was laying on an extra layer of advanced gun safety for the truly conscientious shooter, I guess. When they finished practicing, he's trying to teach him not only advanced gun safety, but the proper way to clean the firearm, and you know that's trouble. Haar told police he inadvertently placed the loaded magazine into the .40 caliber pistol, and was attempting to remove the slide from the pistol when the gun discharged, striking the boy in the armpit. Now, in the armpit? I mean, just happenstance, but it makes you think, like, here, hold this under your arm, brace it while I try to move the slide. So he forgot that he put a loaded magazine in, and then forgot to take it out when he was trying to work the slide and remove it so that he could break the gun down and clean it. I don't know what to tell you, man. That's just basic. Anyway, hopefully all will be well. The boy was transported by helicopter, very expensive, to Corsair Children's Hospital. Not Corsair, like Daily Coast Air. We don't have our own airline or helicopter. That's something completely different. And luckily, there was a children's hospital available for him, and he was treated and released. That's the situation, and that's good news. The follow-up news is often not available, and we can't be sure exactly what's going on afterwards. But I frequently find in following up on these things. The initial report is they were treated and released, or they're expected to make a full recovery, or the wound is not life-threatening. Very rarely do you actually get a report later on of how the recovery went, but every once in a while there's a feature piece that I'll see in the paper, and I usually will pass that around just to let everybody know that, when you're expected to make a full recovery or not life-threatening wounds or what have you, it usually still means months and months or even a lifetime of physical therapy or compensating for that one stupid moment in which you were wounded and, ruined your hand or foot. And, you can survive, certainly, and you can make your way forward in life, but it's a life-changing event very often. Getting shot, it works that way. All right. Well, unfortunate for the folks out in Indiana here. I did, I guess maybe I could grab that story, but I mentioned to you that there was a story out of Ohio, just by way of completing the thought, of a woman who got a gun for Christmas. The details are not out, there's not a great deal of detail available, other than the fact that this was a young woman about, I think, as I recall, I'll find the story, in her early 20s, and if you fill in the details just on your own, you kind of have to fill it in with a little bit of imagination. Could be completely wrong, it's totally speculation, but just based on having watched these things for a certain number of years, you can make a pretty decent guess at what happened here. This was out of Dayton, Ohio, on Christmas Day. It just was reported a little late. Police on Sunday said a woman accidentally used one of her Christmas gifts, a Taurus 9mm handgun, sent a man to the hospital. That's interesting phrasing right there, right? She accidentally used one of her Christmas gifts. Like, I was just sitting here when I accidentally, I turned to my left and poof, I used a Christmas gift. Well, so this is a good argument for for questioning the construction of saying that it was done accidentally. Like, I accidentally began to build a 1,000-piece puzzle. I don't know how that could have happened, but it did. And, she made a conscious decision to use her new Taurus 9mm handgun, which, again, shouldn't probably be a Christmas gift, sent the man to the hospital. The 25-year-old victim suffered a gunshot wound to the leg at a home. Again, they give the address. It's in Dayton. That's basically all you need to know. It's no secret, but, who cares? Police said when officers arrived, I don't know, maybe you're listening in Dayton. You want to know where? Watervliet Avenue. Of course, it would have to be a crazy name that's got weird. Water, that's easy enough. Vliet, Watervliet. It's a name I've seen before, too. I just don't know what the heck that is. Watervliet? You tell me. Do you live in Dayton? Dayton? Ohio? Maybe? Police said when officers arrived, this is the interesting part, they found the victim sitting on a couch on the porch, and a 23-year-old woman who accidentally shot him was crying uncontrollably. She's very sad about this. Obviously very shocked. The shooter's mother is a nurse, and she treated the wound with gauze and applied a tourniquet before medics arrived, according to the report. Witnesses told officers the woman was showing the victim her Christmas gift. Look what I got. When it accidentally discharged a round into the victim's leg, according to the report. There were no arrests or charges filed in the incident, because the only thing that happened was somebody got shot in the leg, and they needed a tourniquet. No police business here, because in Ohio, I didn't mean to. So, no crime. No harm, no foul. Oh, but there's harm. Oh, but I didn't mean to harm anybody. Okay, sure, whatever. My speculation is, and I mean, you can't tell. My first guess was the 25-year-old victim was her boyfriend. I guess it still is, but maybe now it's a was thing. And my guess is that it was a boyfriend who gave her the gun, and she was saying, look, let me try it out, as opposed to showing. So it just says, I was just showing the victim the Christmas gift, as opposed to, like, say, a good friend or neighbor coming over. What'd you get for Christmas? I got a gun. Look, let me show it to you. Although, I don't know, 119? Is that what? Oh, no, that was the last story that happened at 119. So, I don't know. I guess it depends. If it was the morning, I'm guessing that it was the gifter who gave the gun who got shot. It's a wild guess. Could be a friend, could be a neighbor. You never know. But we've seen a number of these things over the years. And no surprise to see another one again. I mentioned, though, by the way, I guess it was one other story that I saw the other day. I didn't grab it. Doesn't usually fit into gun fail. But as you know, I'm watching the number of stories involving break-ins and robberies and burglaries of gun shops. A huge trending crime, extremely hot. The kids love it. Breaking into gun shops typically by smashing a stolen car through the front door and then just grabbing all the guns that they can get. Apparently, the Carolinas has become a super hot spot for that particular kind of crime. But I did notice the other day a story that said a sporting goods store was broken into and robbed of its firearms, because everyone considers firearms sporting. Because you can hunt, and that's still considered an outdoor sport. Sporting goods stores carry guns. Why they carry handguns in some cases, I don't know. I'm not sure what sport that is. If you're target shooting really competitively as a sport, you're not typically using, 9mm semi-automatic handguns to do it, but okay, whatever. They've got guns. I just thought it was interesting that they were broken into and the guns were stolen, and as I'm frequently reminded, why you could do just as much damage with a baseball bat. And do you know where they sell baseball bats? In sporting goods stores. And I was just shocked, I wanted you all to know, to see that after taking the trouble of breaking into a sporting goods store, not a single baseball bat taken. They went straight to the guns. It's almost, as I like to say, as if guns attract crime. All right. Well, that's neither here nor there. I just sort of thought I would use that to round out a morning warm-up, if you will. In the absence of Greg, of course, we do have his abbreviated pundit roundup in the print version of Daily Kos, as usual. And that's as good a place to start as any if you really need to get some grounding in the day's headlines. One such headline that I did not mention yesterday, though you all surely, I can't imagine there was one among you who didn't notice that Carrie Fisher had in fact died. Over the weekend we got the news that she had suffered a rather severe heart attack and was brought to the hospital, and we learned had been stabilized, but heart attack, it's as serious as a heart attack. And by the end of the weekend, in fact, the beginning of the week, we got the news that she had in fact passed away. So many people very deeply moved by that, of course. Star Wars fans, yes, but of course fans of her broader body of work as well. And it's kind of a sad thing. My kids, who are, I guess, too young to be the kind of Star Wars fans perhaps you are, or others who are a little bit older are, depending on what era in which you entered Star Wars fandom. But they did finally get around, of course, to making new Star Wars movies that did feature the Leia character, so they were familiar, so they were able to understand the impact of it. Greg starts his roundup with a rather interesting pull quote from Vanity Fair, and they helpfully allow people to embed those in tweets, and of course Daily Kos helpfully allows us to embed tweets in abbreviated pundit roundups. And seems Carrie Fisher, according to this tweet here, had just one request for her obituary, and Vanity Fair honored it. The pull quote being, "I tell my younger friends that no matter how I go, I want it reported that I drowned in moonlight, strangled by my own bra." Now, that's rather inventive. And, well, what were her reasons? We may never know. But the fact is we got to enjoy that little bit even after she was gone, and we're glad of it. Well, it's sorely missed, to be sure. Let's see, other things that made the roundup this morning from the New York Times. perhaps you've heard of it. For fact-checking website Snopes, a bigger role brings more attacks. Of course it would bring more attacks, of course. They were into debunking fake news before it was cool. They should be an old-school hipster favorite, but instead they find themselves under more attack than usual, which I think was easily enough anticipated. There seems to be a concerted effort online. Now that the election is actually over, it's interesting. I'm watching a lot of people sort of now uncovering more, I guess, for lack of evidence to the contrary, I think I am inclined to believe the accusations that they are Russian trolls. That is, some paid, some not paid, but people who have put together an army of either entirely fake users, like there's no such person, or multiple personae of a real person, but operating multiple Twitter accounts or other social media accounts that, whether paid or not, seem to be in the business of making it look as though the world, and therefore Twitter, was populated by people who were rabid Trump fans, who were avid believers in things that you and I would identify as fake news, but further disbelieving what you and I might consider to be the real news, or at least the regular mainstream media's best attempt at real news. And they're found out one or two at a time and exposed, etc., but to no particular avail. They simply disappear and regenerate elsewhere. But it seems like the task to which they've been set post-election is escalating the war against real news. And anytime they see anybody mention something as being fake, it seems like they pop out of the woodwork to attack the idea that it might be fake, and further to attack the idea that anything you might believe in might actually be a real source at all. And it usually comes down to if they'll actually engage you at all. And I recommend not engaging with people like this, by the way, because honestly, what the best answer for somebody like that at this point, unless you know them, is they usually come up with, well, what evidence do you have that that's really a thing? Well, I read it in the New York Times. Well, that's fake news. Well, no, it isn't. Well, isn't all news biased in some way? Are you telling me you don't admit that there's bias? And if you bother to get into that kind of exchange, you've already lost. The first thing probably you ought to say is, I don't have any evidence that you're a real person, much less any evidence that what you have to say is worth listening to. Anybody can cast doubt on everything in the world. That's not an interesting conversation to have unless it's with somebody you know and trust. And I don't know you, and I don't trust you, and I don't think you're a real person. To be quite honest, that's probably the most fruitful conversation you can have with any of them. Anyway, back over to Snopes. The bigger role brings more attacks. The last line of defense, it says, against the torrent of half-truths, untruths, and outright fakery that make up so much of the modern internet, is a downscale strip mall near the beach. That's an interesting description. Snopes, the fact-checking website, does not have an office designed to impress or even to be noticed. A big sign outside still bears the name of the previous tenant, a maker of underwater headphones. Wow, what happened to them? Inside, there's nothing much. A bunch of improvised desks, a table tennis table, that's awkwardly phrased, would be what you and I would call perhaps ping pong table, but the table tennis enthusiast, a real table tennis enthusiast, will get very angry at you for calling table tennis ping pong. But that leaves you stranded with having to say, well, what do you play on? It's a table tennis table. And surely they have a better name for it than that. I wonder if they're really super fans. Do they call it like a court? I don't know. Anyway, cartons of pop chips and cases of Dr. Pepper. Yum. It looks like a .com on the way to nowhere. And it sort of is, really. But, okay, appearances deceive. This is where the muddled masses, come by the virtual millions to establish just what the heck is really going on in a world turned upside down. Actually, sounds like a kind of an interesting article now that I see it. I don't know. Is it something we want to read the entirety of? But I guess it should be expected that they would run into increased traffic. I wonder if I can pocket that and take a look at it in the. No, I probably can't. See, well, we're only days away from being able to do that, of course, by subscribing to the New York Times. I've forgotten about that. But at any rate, I think that's I'm going to try one more time to see if we can't pocket it quickly enough. Sometimes if you do it really super quick, you can get it into pocket in the preview mode. No, it's not working. And look at it that way. Oh, well. Sounded interesting. Well, next year, New York Times, I'll read more interesting things that you have for us. Well, okay. Greg got a hold of it, and he adjudged that to be the most interesting part. And I agree, because I have no way of knowing what else might be interesting. Over at the Huffington Post, Tucker Carlson, it says, we don't like that guy, messed with the wrong person. I heard this too. It generated a lot of discussion over the weekend and a lot of viral views of the video of the exchange between Tucker Carlson and Lauren Duca, whose name we called, I believe, last week. I think she's the author of that widely shared Teen Vogue piece about Donald Trump in the election. And everyone spent one day being surprised that the article that they were reading that they found so insightful was published in Teen Vogue, and then 2 days admonishing themselves for doubting that writers who happen to write for Teen Vogue might actually be intelligent beings with insight capable of expressing it in interesting and helpful ways. I don't know. And then, of course, Tucker Carlson, I guess, decided to invite her on in order to, one, try to debate her ideas, and then two, if that didn't work out and he hadn't crushed her by the first minute of the segment, by the conclusion of the first minute of the segment, he would turn to saying, yeah, but you write for Teen Vogue, and that's dumb, and so therefore the things that you say are dumb. But apparently that didn't go as expected. And instead, Lauren fought back and fought back about Carlson's proclivity for shouting over his guests and then dismissing them as stupid and turning off the microphones on them and then having one last parting shot post-interview when he's the only one on the air. And he did it. Everyone was sort of sharing the video of the fight and saying right on and everything, and it's certainly the only thing you can do if you find yourself in such a situation. Although, to be honest, I didn't find the exchange all that different from any of the others that he's had over the years. And, he's still going to be on television. So the idea that he was destroyed is, well, frankly, to no effect. He's going to be back on the air. But it was nice to see some pushback. And, of course, once again, being the last word freak that he is, once it was all done and the segment was over, he chimes in saying to her, you should stick with the thigh-high boots. You're better at that. Because occasionally Teen Vogue, as you might know, covers issues of fashion. Of course, Tucker Carlson's interests vary as well, but nobody thinks that's a bad thing because, I don't know, he's got a wacky, upper crusty sounding name and he dresses in suits and he's got a head of hair. So they put him on television and now we all have to listen to him insulting people who sometimes write about things that interest them personally and sometimes have civic thoughts. It's a weird world that we live in. The only way to deal with bullies, I guess like Carlson, is to stand up to them, Greg reminds us, and before moving on to another note here, this time from the tweet of John Harwood. John Harwood, of course, has one of those blue check marks next to his name that makes you say, I need to go and find out who that person is. You don't just say their name and walk away. Look at the blue check mark. Who is he? Well, he's a dad, as it happens. People love to put that in their profiles. Who covers Washington, the economy, and national politics for CNBC and the New York Times, just in case you were interested in that part of his life. Anyway, he made the comment, which Greg found interesting enough to embed in the abbreviated pundit roundup. For those making the silly argument that Obama hurt the Democratic Party, the last 5 presidents have left both houses of Congress in opposition hands. It's not a phenomenon unique to Barack Obama, either because he was a Democrat or because wow, pardon me, Pepe the Frog sneaking back in there, or because, as some of you may have noticed, President Obama was black. So, that's just one of those weird things that sometimes people think that must be the reason that he left Congress in opposition hands. No, as it turns out, the last 5 presidents have done exactly that. I guess he must be exactly like those other guys. All right, or at least in the same category. Well worth pointing out. Let's see, another piece here from the Washington Post. Catherine Rampell, the author of this one. Headline, Trump is being handed a great economy. What happens when it goes south? That, of course, discussed yesterday, I think. I know we discussed that yesterday. Is this the piece that Greg brought up yesterday? Yeah, I think so. So you got the news before it was news, not counting the fact that it had already been printed in the newspaper. But you know how it is. The way people think news breaks when they receive it. I always do. That's how I conceive of it. So we'll get to brag on that one. Anyway, if at the very least, if you depend on Greg's abbreviated pundit roundup for your morning news, and there's no reason why you should not do that, you would have gotten a sneak preview of today's morning headlines yesterday. That's the, like I said, that's the way it gets sorted out in my mind, and hopefully in yours too. Let's see. Here are stories, Greg continues on, about the rotten cabinet members we're going to be stuck with. Confirmation hearings are a time to highlight policy issues, something we don't talk enough about. This election was about politics, not policy, but it will take policy to oppose Trump, and I expect confirmation hearings to be a chance to hit them on policy. For instance, New York Times piece has the headline, How a Budget Chief Can Wreak Havoc. It's a good time to find out about all of those things and exactly what kind of havoc can be wreaked and when and how badly it will wreak, I guess. New York Times also has the headline, Trump's health secretary pick leaves nation's doctors divided. Again, you got a sneak preview of that one with Greg yesterday. From out of Michigan, appropriately enough, how the DeVos family has helped shape education policy in Michigan. Of course, Betsy DeVos, did they say DeVos or DeVos? There, I'm curious how they say it themselves. She, of course, heads or will be heading the education department under Donald Trump, assuming no amazing surprise defeats in the Senate. And for most of them, that is what you should assume. In the Wall Street Journal, discussing the one guy who I think might actually be in some trouble in terms of how rough the confirmation vote goes, but it's been a long time, really since any cabinet secretary was rejected, but especially since a senator was, well, you know what? Well, when was the last rejection of a cabinet appointee? I don't know offhand. And now that I think about it, the first name that comes to mind for the outright defeat of a cabinet-level appointee. Were there any in the Bush administration? I can't recall, but the name that comes to mind is John Tower, who was, of course, a senator. So, I mean, there is some precedent, and it might even be that the fact is that the last cabinet-level rejection and the last cabinet rejection for a senator might be identical, so it would make no sense whatsoever as an analytical statement to say, oh, it's been a long time since anyone was rejected for a cabinet seat, much less a senator, because it's not true. But I'm not positive that that's the case. But in the conventional wisdom on cabinet appointments is, of course, out the window, because most conventional wisdom is out the window at this stage of the game, with Donald Trump having been elected by the Electoral College. But typically speaking, presidents pretty much across the board get their cabinet picks approved, but it's largely because they work within a relatively narrow band of the mainstream school of thought on these appointments. And they take these very moderate, by comparison, nominations to the moderation factory of the U.S. Senate. And when you appoint a senator, it is said, again, conventional wisdom is that those are the easiest nominations to get through because, of course, the people doing the voting know the nominee very well and usually hold them in at least, as they say in Congress when they want to insult somebody, they hold them at least in minimal high regard. But Sessions presents, I think, one of those possible targets. But again, it's just awfully difficult to see a cabinet appointment going down in a majority Republican Congress. Of course, the Tower nomination would have gone back to the George H.W. Bush administration, at which point the Senate was still, I think, in Democratic hands. The Senate changed hands more frequently in those days, and usually does change hands more frequently than the House does. But I do believe it was a Democratic majority that rejected him and said it's just a different prospect. Being rejected by your own party. I mean, there almost always has got to be some dissent from within the party of the president and nominee in order to really sink a nomination. And there is some concern, among Republicans about Jeff Sessions, but I don't know how well it's going to manifest and how strongly it's going to manifest. Anyway, Wall Street Journal, I mean, they've got an eye on it. Jeff Sessions and civil forfeiture actually is the focus of their piece, and that's an interesting thing. That's one of the possibilities for maybe finding some common ground, possibly, with the new Attorney General, assuming that he gets the confirmation. There's been a lot of Republican / libertarian / somewhat conservative, actual mainstream conservative, concern over the abuse of the civil forfeiture procedures. And there's, I guess, some chance that Sessions, I don't know, I'm not certain what his position is on it, but I have seen mentioned in passing that it's a possibility for reform. And, I guess we'll take anything we can get. Wall Street Journal not focusing entirely on, on the possibility of his rejection. Anyway, Sessions, Greg remarks, is arguably the worst of a bad lot, but there are a lot of contenders, including nominees at state and HUD and others not mentioned here. Also, let's see, an interesting comment that he embeds via tweet along the way. Blaming the UN when things go wrong is like blaming Madison Square Garden when the Knicks play badly. That was Richard Holbrooke's quote being delivered by Warren Bass via Twitter. And let's see, Jonathan Capehart at the Washington Post on not forgetting about reader responsibility. Let's see. Erlanger is right. This clip begins. You'll have to look up who that is and what he was right about. A free press applies to all kinds, the responsible and the deplorable. Gowing is right. That free press now includes and competes with other platforms and sources, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, etc., that are disrupting not only how people get their news, but who they trust to give them their news. That's important. But what neither demands is an end to the passivity of the news consumer. In our current Wild West news landscape, where the internet and social media have eliminated gatekeepers and eroded confidence in once trusted sources, there is only so much hand-holding a journalist can do to ensure the public is informed. If the public is duped by fake news or irritated by what news has become, it shares in the blame. Damn it. I knew I had something to do today. People who believe fake news, Greg continues, do not get a free pass. It's their fault they believe it, and they want to believe it. It's a classic case of see what you believe, not believe what you see. And let's see. Also some commentary embedded here from, is John Harwood again? Didn't we? My goodness. Is John Harwood just dominating this roundup or what? Let's see. 2 tweets. It doesn't really count as a tweet storm. It's more of a sprinkling. Drivers of D-Dem casualties under Obama. Let's see. A, it's not numbered, it's lettered. A, depth of financial crisis / Great Recession. B, accumulated angst over 30-year income stagnation. C, effective / united Republican opposition, especially to the Affordable Care Act. And D, Obama's race amid white fear of cultural change. An interesting collection. Let's see, what's next here? Business Insider reminding us things we think we know that we really don't, which could be a pundit-defining trait. An examination of exit polls, in 3 key states that helped swing the election Trump's way revealed that the economy was by far the most important issue to voters. Okay, that makes sense. But those who reported the economy as their top issue, at least in the abstract, believed that Clinton had a stronger message. In Michigan, 52% of voters said the economy was, quote, the most important issue facing the country, compared to 60% of voters who said the same thing about the economy in 2012. This year, Clinton won by 6 points among people who reported that the economy was the most important issue, while Obama won that issue only by 3 points. In Pennsylvania, Clinton won by 4 points among the 56% of voters who reported that the economy was most important. In 2012, Romney won by 5 points among the 61% of the voters most concerned about the economy. The results were even more stark in Wisconsin. While about the same percentage of voters said the economy was the most important issue facing the country in 2016 and 2012, 55 and 56% respectively, Clinton won those voters by 11 points, while Romney won the issue by a single point in 2012. So change, Greg says, is what mattered more. The message or messenger didn't matter, and yet she almost won anyway and did win the popular vote. Thank you, Jim Comey, for giving us Donald Trump. And last up in the morning roundup here, 2 tweets from Dan Diamond, who has been rather extraordinary to watch in the closing weeks of the election, as well as the few days afterwards. A writer for Politico's Pulse, by the way, a morning briefing on healthcare politics. In case you were wondering, let's see. This is clearly true, Diamond says. More than 20 million Americans gained coverage, including millions of white working class voters. Remember how we were supposed to pay attention to them? Well, we did. We gave them health insurance, but that wasn't what they were after, apparently. Although it is, because they're just voting for Trump and hoping that he doesn't take it away. But it wasn't what was moving their votes for some reason. How much did Obamacare help poor whites? Well, Greg Sargent, he says, over at the Plumb Line, got one key number from Gallup, and he's got a screen grab to prove it. It says this: that drop, I guess, in the uninsured rate, it turns out is even more pronounced among poor whites. Gallup Healthways survey tells me that among whites without a college degree who have household incomes under $36,000, the uninsured rate has dropped from 25% in 2013 to 15% now. That's a drop of 10 percentage points. It's often noted that the law has disproportionately expanded coverage among African Americans and Latinos. That is correct, but it has also disproportionately expanded coverage among poor white people. Basically, I think you can say among poor people, generally speaking, regardless of race. And, that didn't seem to matter. Interestingly, to the poor white folks, it helped dramatically and disproportionately. But it did seem to matter if you think that votes were cast on this basis, which I guess is a questionable matter, to Latino and black voters. So as among the poor folks who were helped overwhelmingly by the Affordable Care Act, some strange mystery ingredient caused the white folks among them to flock to Trump in record numbers, and everybody else to credit the party that actually gave them the help they were looking for and stick with them. I wonder what that strange, crazy mystery element might be. This would probably be a good time to ask whether whether Armando is available and has any interest in joining us. I don't know whether if he's listening, then that's easy enough to reach him. If he's not listening, I wonder if I should just send him a note it won't be a good idea to do via Skype, but maybe via Twitter and see if we can't pull him in. As a matter of fact, it's probably a good time to go and check in with some of my pre-recorded segments that we hold in reserve, and some of them from our good listeners and contributors from across the country, and some of them, were not time sensitive, as I recall. Now I'm trying to remember which one. I thought I had sorted these by whether or not I had still played them, and I'm trying to think back now. I have to sort of check over in my mind who sent which ones and whether or not they're still useful. Some of these date way, way back. Let's see. I've got one from Brian Monroe here, and I'm trying to figure out which one it is. And, yeah. Okay, well, let's see. One from Brian Monroe here, and I think I've got one here from Rosalind McGregor that was one of the ones that was stamped, not time sensitive. And then I've got one from John R. back in Texas that's a little bit more dated, but also still perhaps of some interest as we move forward. Let me roll out this one here that I've got from Roz, and search it up and make sure that I've got the link for it, and use the break, one, to catch my breath, and two, to see if I can't, one, take care of, I'm on one, so A, take care of reaching Armando, and B, try and make my lunch arrangements behind the scenes here. Let me see. Roz, can you help us out here?
Good morning, David.
Yes.
I have another news item from your Michigan correspondent. Today I wish to bring to your listeners an article about what a city in Michigan has done to raise revenue. The title of the article in Bloomberg is Billionaire Rescues Michigan City with Cash to End Fiscal Plight. In Kalamazoo, Michigan, a city besieged by poverty and state aid cuts, Mayor Bobby Hopewell had few options left. The city had already thinned the ranks of the police force and halted work on aging infrastructure only to keep spending millions more than it brings in. Then in July, he landed an unheard-of lifeline. William Johnston, the husband of billionaire Rhonda Stryker, and William Parfett, whose great-grandfather founded Upjohn, agreed to give the city $70 million, a first step towards creating a $500 million endowment that Kalamazoo will use to put an end to chronic budget shortfalls and pay for a property tax cut aimed at drawing residents to the 76,000-person city. The state of Michigan has not helped us, Hopewell said. A philanthropic approach might make sense. More than 7 years after the U.S. emerged from the worst recession since the Great Depression, cities are turning increasingly to charity, if only for modest relief from pressure caused by swelling pension debts, declining populations, and limits on their ability to raise taxes. After Detroit, in 2013, became the biggest city ever to go bankrupt, private donors stepped in to help keep the city's art collection from being auctioned off and shelter retired city workers from potentially devastating cuts to their pension checks. Flint, Michigan, reeling from a lead-tainted water supply, received philanthropic aid. Even relatively well-heeled cities, including Los Angeles, Jacksonville, Florida, and Boise, Idaho, have boosted staff devoted to raising money for parks, libraries, and schools. Like all cities, there are definitely limited resources, said Don Lockhart, who was named Jacksonville's Director of Strategic Partnerships this year. There is unlimited demand, placing an incredible amount of strain on both nonprofits and on the city. Nowhere has it pushed quite as far as Kalamazoo, a city 140 miles west of Detroit, where more than a third of the residents live in poverty. Since 2009, the city has cut about $12 million from its general fund, which had operating revenue of almost $53 million in the 2016 budget year. That's resulted in the elimination of about 120 jobs over the past 5 years, which means it may take residents longer to pay a bill or receive approval for a new building, said City Manager John Restema. The initial $70 million donation, to be used over 3 years, will be used to close Kalamazoo's budget deficit and lower the general city property tax by about a third over that time. If the city succeeds in increasing the endowment to between $300 million and $500 million, officials plan to cut rates even more. That's the only strings that have been attached to this to do greatness for everyone, Ritmus said. The donations could help pay for city improvement projects that have been on the shelves without funding, such as lead pipe removal, road work, or entrepreneurial programs, Mayor Hopewell said. The donation to Kalamazoo is quite unusual because it's being used to solve a budget deficit instead of underwriting specific civil projects, said Robert Collier, Chief Executive Officer of the Council of Michigan Foundations, which made up philanthropic organizations in the state. The financial needs are high for cities in Michigan, where the state constitution limits their power to raise and collect real estate taxes. And with the state contending with its own financial strain, lawmakers cut revenue sharing to municipalities by about $5.5 billion between fiscal year 1998 and fiscal year 2016, according to an April report by Great Lakes Economic Consulting, a nonpartisan group based in Eaton Rapids. Kalamazoo could solve its budgetary problems without relying on donors, said City Commissioner Matt Milkarek, though it would be politically challenging. He said it should still pursue instituting a city income tax, a step that voters have rejected twice in case the endowment is unable to be fully funded or its investments do poorly. On a side note, as a Michigan resident, I've noticed that the municipalities that do have an income tax are usually the larger urban areas that are in desperate need of resources to help prop up their communities. So there you have it, David. That's just a short report from your Michigan correspondent. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Rosalind. Thank you for bailing us out there. I will have used the short break to try and contact Armando and see whether he's available and interested in coming on the show. But we certainly have plenty of material to cover us in the interim, whether he's available or not. Yesterday I passed on starting on this, though it was our first show of the week, live show of the week, and I was sort of anxious to get to it. It was a very interesting, there is a very interesting thread of discussion, again, in that area about which I still want to be relatively cautious, the Russian interference and influence on our election. And again, I guess if you're careful with the language, it's not a terribly controversial position to stake out to say, all right, there was certainly some Russian interference with the election, but one you have to be careful not to say. For instance, to conflate the several things that they are alleged to have done, i.e. hacking at the Democratic National Committee and getting a hold of emails and then releasing them / planting them with other organizations that would do the release for them, like WikiLeaks, although WikiLeaks denies that Russia was their source. I don't know whether that rules out intermediaries or not, but clearly, at any rate, that's a very distinct episode in the election, the hacking at the DNC. And then, of course, there is the employment of either, what will we say, social media, either trolls or distributors of fake news / propaganda, however you want to label it. But those are distinct efforts, and there's nothing so far, anyway, immediately illegal about internet trolling or the sharing of bad or even purposefully made up fake news or information or interpretation of real news or what have you. So they're distinct things, and it sometimes gets conflated into Russia hacked the election, and that's helped along by other stories like the fact, and I think it is a fact, that hackers either tied to the Russian government or hacking on their own accord from within the boundaries of the Russian Federation, having landed in the computer systems of several state elections boards that could potentially affect the integrity of voter files, etc., and the election, the federal agency entrusted with overseeing election assistance throughout the 50 states as well. But there's no clear evidence of exactly what, if anything, the hackers were able to accomplish inside of those systems, just that they had somehow breached the integrity of those systems, which is usually a pretty good alarm bell. They don't usually just break in just to look around and and then leave without doing anything that would have, presumably there was some reason for them to try to break in, not just simply the challenge of doing it. I don't know how great the challenge was anyway. But it gets conflated into, for instance, the very many concerns people have with electronic voting systems, and people come away with the impression, for instance, that, the Russians hacked into our actual voting booths and changed the numbers, so Trump didn't win, Hillary Clinton did, and they just erased that and replaced it with their own. Okay, that's something that we're a million miles away from proving, which is appropriate because I don't think that there's anybody seriously at this point alleging that on the public record, in a forum meant for widespread mainstream consumption as news. And yet many people come away believing it anyway, and we are, in our own ways, I guess, subject to that sort of fake news virus, even though it seems to be more widespread and that much more fantastical, I would say, on the right side. But anyway, I think you're on safe ground, at least in saying there was clearly some effort on the part of Russia to influence the kind of information people got and believed and allowed to influence their vote decision making. And that seems to be, non-controversial to say, and it should be non-controversial in that, one, there's plenty of evidence of it happening, and two, you're not even really charging anyone with anything illegal, so no one's in any particular jeopardy, I don't think, for having put this forward. But there's also another weird bent to this, another weird twist on the Russia involvement story, and this one, I don't know how much credence to give it, but I will say that it's being pursued by a writer that a lot of us have been following on Twitter and have been giving a lot of credence to. And so far, it's stood up to most of the scrutiny that I've seen. If you feel differently, do let me know. And remember, there are plenty of respectable writers out there that I think are at least trying to remain cautious and throw just a little bit of cold water on things as we go along, just to minimize the possibility of making enormous mistakes along the way, even if it doesn't prevent them from happening at all. But Sarah Kendzior is the writer that I mentioned, and who had a interesting, we'll say, thread over the weekend. She is, of course, a writer who you might have seen in the Globe and Mail, in Quartz, in the Guardian, and others. Interestingly, regards herself, it says, as an anthropologist and a researcher, by the way, on Central Asia and Middle America. It's an interesting combination. Based out of St. Louis in all this. And, okay. It came to my attention, this thread, by way of blog diva Liza Sabater, who many of you likely also follow on Twitter, pointing out, as people often do, pointing to things and saying, this, or thread, or in this case, this thread by Sarah proves, it says, we need historians with journalism skills, not the other way around, to report on current affairs. Although I would say if we had journalists with historian skills, that would be pretty good. I don't know that we necessarily need historians with journalism skills versus journalists with a background in history. But okay, either way, sounds like it's going to be an interesting thread, right? Okay, it actually starts, let's see, with, now is this the first of Sarah's tweets, or is this just where Liza picks up the thread? I think it, as I recall, well, I'm not 100% certain, but let's take a look at the first one she points to here. Okay, Armando is available too. Let's make use of that, but let's begin with this. I'll see what you can go ahead and join us, and maybe you want to talk about the Russia issue, or maybe just to dismiss it. But I just thought this was sort of an interesting thread, and I'll begin on it if I can just get the right button here. She includes in her tweet some clips from a 1988 Washington Post article. Trump was sought out by the Soviets, it says, in 1986, invited to the USSR in January of 1987, flew to the USSR, remember, still the USSR, in July 87. This according to the archives of the Washington Post. And I guess Sarah's real point in all of this is that there was a considerable amount of information that you would have found had you searched the archives of major newspapers around the country on the terms of Donald Trump and any connection with Russia or the Soviet Union. It's just a very strange thing. The clips that she includes in the tweet from the article, I mean, just by way of highlighting what she thinks is important, is this here. It might pay off to just read the article itself. But the courtship, it says, began in 1986 when Trump was seated next to Ambassador Yuri Dubinin at a luncheon given by Leonard Lauder, who runs his mother Este's cosmetics business. Yeah, it goes that far back. Oh, here's Armando now. Let me bring him in here. Hey, good morning, Armando. How you doing?
Hey, good morning, David.
I'm without Greg today, and
oh no,
yeah, well, his schedule is changing, but I just was sort of, casting about for which direction to go in the face of the fire hose of information and issues. But you know what? It would really it's a good opportunity. The timing is good. I just picked up on a thread that I've seen explored now on Twitter and also over on one of the more highly recommended diaries over at Daily Kos, which seems like a strange new twist on the Russia angle And one which, I mean, I've been reluctant to kind of pursue most of this the whole time because like I said, I'm still stuck with the notion that it sounds so antiquated, right off the bat to say, well, the Russians, they interfered, they're undermining democracy. I mean, we shouldn't forget, of course, that they come from a very different place and a very different background, and despite the fact that Soviet communism has collapsed, the Russians have always been something of a mystery to the West, and B, have always sort of set themselves in at opposition with the rest of Western Europe and then what became known as the West, even as they adopted hyper-capitalism. But they've never really been on a friendly footing, despite the fact that they're willing to share dollars and petrodollars. It's never been a really smooth integration of the Russians. But this is really interesting in that they're now one or more writers trying to develop a historical line that includes. That comes to the conclusion that Donald Trump had been under development as a Soviet espionage asset since the early 80s. Does this make any sense to you? Are you seeing this elsewhere?
Well, I just clicked on that diary. Obviously, people talk about it. Sarah Kinzier on Twitter. I'll be honest with you. It didn't grab me, but I know people have been looking at, well, in 1987 they did this and then he did that. And I mean, it's all true. He ran some crazy full page ad in the 80s criticizing Reagan, as I recall. Yeah. So I get that. I don't even know, from my perspective, I look at it this way. I don't know if this is helpful or not. For whatever reason, the Russians clearly preferred Trump to be president. Now, there's two ways of looking at it. Is it that they didn't want Hillary Clinton to be president? Okay, maybe. But I don't know. What was Hillary Clinton going? She was to start a war with them. I guess maybe she would have been more aggressive, possibly, on the Ukraine? I don't know. But the motivation seems more related to Trump than to Clinton, it seems to me. I know there's a lot of people that have that. It says, well,
as between the two of them,
there's been a lot of record. There's a pretty good record that Putin really despises Clinton. Okay. Still in all, Trump says things that they've got to favor, He's very, just from an egotistical standpoint, Putin doesn't seem quite as narcissistic as Trump. I'm sure it's pretty high on his list. So, having Putin say nice things about Trump and Trump say nice things about Putin, I guess gives him some psychic benefit. But more particularly, Trump made a lot of statements, and I don't know that he even thought about them. That's the whole problem with Trump. You don't know what he's thinking and what he's just blabbing. Mm-hmm. The NATO stuff was clearly in Russia's interests. Indeed, I would argue the belligerence with China stuff is also pretty helpful to the Russians, who would have, in their old mindset, felt cornered by fairly good relations between the United States and China. Mm-hmm. So there's a pretty basic scenario here why Trump is more favored by the Russians than otherwise. Is he a spy? I don't think he's a witting spy. He's just a bore and, frankly not well mentally and all these awful things that I don't need to repeat. Because we all know them. Yeah. Right. He's not fit to be president. He's not fit to be dog catcher.
Well, that appears to be true.
He's easily manipulated, and he's already predisposed to taking pro-Russian positions. So, from the Russian perspective, I think it's perfectly rational for them to prefer Trump to Clinton. And what they did that's strikes the United States pretty hard, I guess, is the pretty deliberate and, frankly, not very stealthy interference in our election. It was a perfect storm. That kind of thing probably wouldn't have worked in 2012, but Clinton was a lightning rod for a lot of both right and left irrationality. So it all sort of it was a perfect storm, and it clearly did help Trump. Was it enough to win the election? Maybe all by itself it was, but it wasn't. But I happen to be someone who thinks the Comey stuff was more damaging than the Putin stuff. But who knows? Most damaging was the media itself.
Well, yeah, I don't think Comey's letter is as damaging absent a strong grounding from other sources that have basically primed an already angry and anti-Clinton electorate, the Republican electorate, to accept even the Comey letter. I mean, as brazen a breach of protocol as it was, didn't say all that much, but it didn't have to say much of anything. Everyone was already primed to believe. And the fact that they could then point to an FBI director to say, see, even Comey says, Comey didn't say anything in particular, but they were going to take it that way. I already believe, all these horrible things. And now an FBI director says a thing that he wouldn't say unless it was extraordinary circumstances. So it must be that.
And that was a fair inference if you think about it. Because the FBI director, frankly, isn't supposed to say anything at any time.
That's true.
About ongoing investigations. And there's a special protocol with regard to things that have political impact.
Yes.
Meaning you say even less than nothing.
So it couldn't possibly be the case that it's anything other than this horrible thing we already believe. As it turns out, by the way, polling says that among the crazed wackos who were always Trump voters start to finish, some enormous percentage of them seem convinced after the fact that what Comey was raising as an issue was that the emails that had been stolen from the DNC in fact detailed pedophilia at Comet Pizza. So,
my gosh.
I mean, I don't know what to do with those. Again, a large percentage of the people identified as crazy, who are basically a small slice of even Trump's voters to begin with.
Really?
But, yeah.
Wait. Remember who really got the Pizzagate thing going?
Well, I don't know.
The close confidant, the son of the incoming national security advisor.
Well, he certainly played a part in it. I know Alex Jones was involved.
Well, Alex Jones is Alex Jones.
Yeah, but that's
the
true.
The son of the incoming national security advisor, who is a close associate of his father's.
And I think his father actually retweeted something.
His father's retweeted many crazy things. But specific to Pizzagate, I don't think he was necessarily involved.
Well,
but remember, they had to kick the guy off the transition thing, whatever that means. The transition committee.
They had to make a public statement.
Flynn Jr. had to get kicked off.
Allegedly. Yeah, they did make that statement anyway.
I mean, what does that even mean?
Right. But that's true, and that's an enormous problem because, one, it's indicative of what's likely going on in Dad's head, and two, it's crazy, and the guy's got...
Look, I think we're getting too used to this, and I'm going to say the words again. Mm-hmm. The incoming national security advisor.
Yes. Who
happened to have been in business with a Russian spy.
Now there we have a better...
Circle you back to Russia.
Sure. That's true.
That's a fact. I'm not making that up. That's not Pizzagate.
No. And it is, we certainly are becoming too used to it. It's the sort of thing that would be the major plot point of a spy thriller in Hollywood. Yeah. it would be the sort of thing that, like I say, would make a spy thriller, the sort of thing you just really can't make up. It would never happen in real life.
Well, spies, at least in theory, work stealthily. This is out in the open.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe
hiding in plain sight, I guess.
I guess so.
So, I mean, if you talk about this Russian spy thing, I think there's more evidence on Flynn, but I think Flynn's just crazy too.
Okay.
And look, he got fired because he was crazy. People said, you're too crazy. We can't have you be the director of Defense Intelligence Agency.
Yep.
But he's going to be the National Security Advisor.
Right. Well, nobody needs...
But then, hey, look who's going to be president.
Well, that too. That is a problem.
Yeah, there was this thing that happened today, and it involves Daily Kos. Some guy wrote a post about how he's not having a dinner party because Trump voters or something. Sounds silly. Whatever. I didn't think much of it one way or the other. But then I saw like McKay Coppins and this Justin Green, who's now a Mike Allen acolyte, saying, this is preposterous. I said, you cannot call anything preposterous when Donald Trump is going to be president. Preposterous has moved way over there.
Oh, yes. Are we talking
way over there?
There.
I mean, if it's like on Pluto now. It is so far away from what preposterous used to be. The president-elect of the United States this morning, you must have seen this.
I don't know. I was a little addled this morning. What happened?
He tweeted. Well, let me see if I can find the exact words he tweeted.
You got to be careful.
Well, last night he did the thank you, Donald thing, so I know you saw that. But yes. I thought today's was worse.
Thank you, Donald. Okay. Oh, got worse than that?
I think so. I'm quoting from his tweet from 9 o'clock this morning.
All right.
Donald J. Trump.
Yes.
Tweet quote, doing my best to disregard the many inflammatory President O statements and roadblocks. Thought it was going to be a smooth transition. Wow. Not.
Oh.
The president-elect of the United States just picked a fight on Twitter with the president of the United States.
Okay. Seems rational.
That's not only not normal, it's insane.
Yeah. Well, by the way, the sort of payback that everyone else probably expected for Obama's working hard to make for a smooth transition and doing and shying away from where the Democratic, and it might even have been a good choice to say, all right, well, look, I know the Democratic base is going to be angry at having lost this election, but I have a major responsibility to make this work as to the extent it can. I don't want this to also blow up because I, dumped this all on an unprepared Donald Trump. We'll do our best to prepare him and minimize the possibility for nuclear annihilation in the future just based on mistake. But having gone out of his way to try and really tutor Trump to the extent possible, the payback is it's only been a matter of a couple of weeks, and he's already having, trying to pick a Twitter war, which isn't going to happen, but trying to pick a Twitter war with Obama.
The weirdest thing about it is, I'm not, I don't have perfect information, but I think the inferences and the deductive reason are pretty clear. What happened was Obama said he would have beaten him.
Yeah, that's the inflammatory
and that
statement.
Is killing him because he's already very sensitive about this popular vote thing.
Yes.
He keeps telling people to call his electoral college win a historic landslide, which of course it's not. It's 46 out of 58.
Right.
But he's just not well. He's not. Forget about not knowing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Forget about even having bad ideas. He's not well in his mind.
Yes, I noticed that there was an open letter of sorts from some psychiatrists saying, while we won't, commit the sin of trying to diagnose him without examining him and speaking with him, there are some troubling signs. I mean, it won't go anywhere, but writing to the president saying, some undefined thing needs to be done to take note of the fact that you might be handing the presidency and the nuclear codes and all the things that go with it over to somebody who's really should perhaps be under some sort of psychiatric care. And how will you tell? I mean, this is really tough because this is the nightmare scenario. There's 50% of the country who will dismiss that out of hand as partisan sniping. What do you do with somebody who really exhibits the signs of a serious mental illness if you're about to hand them the suitcase that can kill all life on Earth? How seriously do you take it? Are you overstating the case? Are you only saying he's crazy because you disagree with him so strongly? And there's a very weird undercurrent of history, and usually involving Russia and the Soviet Union too, in which both communists and virulent anti-communists here in the United States insisted that psychiatry was a key weapon in combating the other side and in suppressing your own dissidents by declaring them mentally unfit and stashing them away in institutions, something that virulent anti-communists like Ronald Reagan in his early political days accused the Soviets of doing regularly, and the Soviets will now accuse any Americans who level the same charges against Donald Trump of doing. It's very weird.
Yeah, I mean, I hear everything you just said. But it's not like I'm going out on a limb here.
No.
It's not like look, I'd argue Paul LePage looks sane next to him.
And that's not easy to do.
Think about it. LePage acts much more normal than Trump. And he's crazy.
That is weird. Okay. Yeah, that's, I mean,
it's a real thing. This is a real issue. I mean, as I said, I'm putting aside the ideology, what he says he's for. I'm putting aside the crudeness, the vulgarity. I'll put aside the conflicts, the corruption. I'll put aside the sexism. I'll put aside the racism, the overt racism of this campaign, for this purpose of just saying to you, all right, suppose I could accept all that, which I can't, but suppose I could. He's crazy.
Yeah, that's problematic. And this, like many other things, is something that we just aren't equipped to handle.
We aren't. And the media least of all. But yeah. I think almost as a body politic, we're not.
It is weird because, I mean, technically we are equipped to handle it. We've actually anticipated this problem and institutionalized a solution, or at least, a putative solution. The problem is that the political system isn't ready to deal with
exactly. They're not dealing with the reality. I mean, they've normalized insanity.
The Constitution for this purpose. Amending the Constitution is not a simple thing. It's not easy to do. I mean, a lot of people were half joking when they were talking about, what was it, the 25th Amendment, a couple of weeks ago. It might turn out that he's crazy and they might need to use the 25th Amendment to replace him with Mike Pence, and then jokes about whether Mike Pence would be better or worse. But it's clear that we've confronted this issue and said one day, I mean, now that the United States is a superpower, now that we have the power to destroy the world, or even if we didn't, if you're just concerned about the continuity of governance in the United States, you're going to have to, at some point, take stock of things and deal with the possibility that you might have a president who starts out entirely sane, but something happens, or whatever. And what are we going to do about it? Well, okay, we're very rational people. Let's sit down and we'll design a policy that makes sense and that's flexible enough to deal with events in real time. And so the bureaucrats and technocrats put together a program. I guess you could argue about how thorough or complete or well thought out it is, but we actually sat down and made a plan and raised it to the level of a constitutional amendment. What do you do if you've happened to have elected a president who is crazy or goes crazy? And we've got the plan. We've now got the president that might actually fit that bill, and that's being very kind to say he might. And we're staring at it and saying, I don't know. I mean, what are the optics? What are the optics of instituting the constitutional amendment you went out of your way to pass with the overwhelming agreement of the elected bodies representing the people of the United States? I don't know. What are the implications? What are the optics of not doing it in the face of having prepared this for yourself and then being confronted with exactly what you were worried about and saying, let's see how he does? What are the optics of that? I don't know. I guess
they're unacceptable to me.
Yeah.
And I say this for Democrats too. I mean, look, the president. It's hard for me to criticize him. What do you do? I'm not sure he can do it, but everybody else should say, look, I know that he won the Electoral College, but he's crazy. There's nothing wrong with saying that. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to oppose him. I said, look, I hope he's not crazy, but he sure looks it to me.
Yeah.
I mean, is that bad politics? Maybe. I don't know, but it's the reality. And I was looking at, you talk about we have the institutions, and we do. We have impeachment in theory. If he's truly crazy, you have the way of removing him.
Yeah, we don't have to resort to impeachment.
That's not going to happen, obviously, because, well, for two reasons. Republicans would, basically destroy themselves politically if they were to do that. But for better or worse, Trump's the most popular Republican in the party. Then it's not close. You know, they cross Trump, they're going to lose. Those people are very capable of walking away from voting. So I see the political fear, but my God, he's crazy.
Yeah. I guess what we didn't contemplate in the 25th Amendment or anywhere else is, what do you do if the president's crazy, but 50% of Americans have the same craziness and think he's not crazy, and that you are crazy for thinking he is? I don't know.
I think that's actually, I don't know if you were just being glib, but it's a good point.
I was, but I mean, that's essentially what we're facing here is there's going to be a significant portion of the population, not just that because they support him, but because they actually believe the same things or worse because of, the combination of fake news, real news that just either doesn't appeal to them or what have you, or they just don't trust.
I'm a little skeptical that people actually believe all those things. I mean, to me, it's just another partisan check mark.
Well,
Obama was born in Kenya. Yeah, you say it because you hate Obama. I mean, I really do think sometimes those polls are kind of.
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly, I guess the individual instances of, what percentage of Americans believe the following specific crazy scandal that has maybe a kernel of truth at the heart of it, and then the rest of it is fantasy. That doesn't tell me that much. But what in the aggregate, worry about is the number of people who, whichever parts of the strange conspiracy theories they may believe or disbelieve, will nonetheless, even if it's none of them, would nonetheless come to the conclusion that adjudging Donald Trump to be too mentally unstable to assume the presidency is in fact a partisan act. That there is no proof that he is crazy. What kind of proof would you offer? Anything?
Well, there's plenty of proof he's crazy.
Yeah, well, but what kind of proof? A, what kind of proof would you be asked to offer? And B, who cares what lay people who are Donald Trump supporters think measures up to psychiatric standards? That would be of no interest. But anytime you have, if you propose anything like this, or on a much lesser scale, just a plain old discussion of what's in the news today, you're likely to get from the other side. Almost anyone you engage with will simply say, well, that's just not true, or that's just biased reporting. That's just your opinion, or these psychiatric people who examined him as psychiatrically are biased. How do I know they're not Democrats? How do I know they're not, spies from another country at this point? They just accuse them of being almost anything. It's very weird that you can't even have just a regular opinion about anything in the news publicly without having some slice and it's we think it's becoming more significant. I don't know. Maybe some of these people, of course, that you engage with on Twitter about it, who you shouldn't engage with, aren't even real people. They're they're literally not actually real people engaging you. But, there's nothing in the 25th Amendment about what to do if half the population gets its news from sources that will simply say whatever the hell it is they need to say to keep them as readers and make them believe in whichever political candidate they choose to back. 50% of the population will hear that the invocation of the 25th Amendment is a coup and maybe is being directed by, I don't know, they may say Martians for all I know. But a significant portion of the population will say, this portion of the Constitution is illegitimate. I don't even remember how this got in here. I didn't vote for it. Where did this come from? That's not how constitutional amendments work. Whatever. Well, so what? Who cares? You're an elitist. You Eastern elites with your constitutional amendment theory. Repeal Article 6, damn it. You know, what? I'm not sure what to do with guys like that.
Well, I guess...
what percentage of the population they represent, or how many of them are in Congress? I don't know.
You know, there's even here. What if the Republican Party was actually a principled party? Actually cared about the things they say they care about and the country.
Yeah.
Then you could say, well, those guys at least have control of Congress. How much can he do? Well, he can blow up the world, but, you know, in terms of passing laws, he can't do much. Or you could, you know, actually my theory doesn't even work because, I mean, the insanity, it can spark so many things that it's not, the way we've turned the presidency. I think I saw an article, and I should forward it to you because it's kind of an interesting one, and it goes to a lot of the thinking that you do on norms and things. And the norm of our Constitution really is an interpretive one. In terms of the presidency itself, you know, we turned it into what it is today, which is the most powerful person, not just in the country, but in the world. And not just because of his control of the military, but by and large, the veto power and other powers that we have allowed the president, well, the veto power, of course, is express. But in essence, you know, submit a budget. And we talked about this when Trump said he would, I guess, I don't know if he's submitting a budget now or not, but the feeling was that's Obama's job, right? And we could have had a weak president. And for a lot of years we didn't. Certainly Lincoln and Jackson empowered the presidency a great deal. But FDR, of course, really revolutionized the presidency in a time of crisis, and it sort of stayed that way. And now the president, you know, reaches into so many different aspects of governance that the constitutional structure, in theory, is not what it was designed to be. As someone said, it could have been more of a ceremonial position, being president. You know, just coming in to veto on, you know, very egregious moments, things that really were, you know, stepped in, something that would happen very rarely. And it happens rarely here, I guess. I mean, relatively so. But that's because Congress won't pass things unless they know they can get the president's support. They know they need a signature, ergo it's sort of the restraint is imposed by that power. So it's hard to say what would have been if we had developed the presidency in a different way. But we didn't. And we're giving these powers to a man who I think legitimately you must question his mental well-being. And that's unprecedented in this country that I know of. I mean, was there rumors that some other president was? I know that Woodrow Wilson got sick.
Yeah.
But when he was elected, he wasn't crazy or unwell mentally. This is unprecedented, and we're not acting like it is, and that's
Yeah.
That's not right, in my
I don't know.
opinion.
Do you think we're not acting like it is? I mean, maybe it's the fact that it's unprecedented that is the reason that we don't know what to do about it. We're always stymied by unprecedented situations. We're people who, I mean, to the extent you believe in the rule of law, precedent is everything. And yeah, I mean, is it categorically different if a president is elected under normal circumstances and then suffers some sort of episode that unbalances him mentally? And that would be something.
That's the 25th Amendment.
Yeah. What do you do?
Option.
Right. And is it arguably out of the scope of the 25th Amendment to say that, look, with their eyes open, the populace went to the polls to vote for a person precisely because of the mental imbalance that he displayed. How do you invalidate that with the 25th Amendment?
How do I invalidate that is a good question, because he's not disqualified. There's nothing in the Constitution that says a crazy person can't be president, right?
That's right. That's it. That's the new argument for Twitter. Show me in the Constitution where it says a crazy idiot can't be president.
It literally does not.
Yeah.
I mean, the qualifications are to be a natural-born citizen and 35 years of age.
Right.
That's the extent of it.
I guess that's true. And yeah, I mean, like I said, arguably, if you say, yeah, we knew who he was when we voted for him. Didn't you? Well, yeah, I mean, I knew who he was and that's why I voted against him. Yeah, well, it didn't work out for you. I mean, you had more than we did, but electoral college, but again, you have to then remember that they also argued that, look, it does say in the Constitution that the electoral college, doesn't really, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that the electoral college has to show up and vote for the people that the popular vote validated, but they insisted that they do, or you have to anyway, either because of state statute or because of what people expect, et cetera, et cetera. The part of the Constitution, I guess you could argue, as a liberal living Constitution type, you could certainly say, sure, you're right. We didn't take the time to write down you can't be crazy and be president. That was the strong implication of the 25th Amendment, but arguably that was for a mid-term psychotic episode and not the validating of an election of an openly crazy person. But fine, we can also, I guess, play the same game and say, show me in the Constitution where it says the Electoral College should just say, psychotic person, what are you going to do? I'm going to rubber stamp. They took a lot of time to carefully craft this otherwise rather ridiculous system, only to find out that 200 years later, what we really meant was, don't pay any attention to what happens. You just show up and tell everybody that what happened, and go home. There's no role here for you, Electoral College. You don't have to do anything. You don't balance anything between states. All you do is, tell us what the numbers were. That's the reason we put you in the Constitution. In the olden days, the Founding Fathers knew that people didn't understand numbers very well, and what they really wanted was for the most important prominent political figures in the several states to gather in, at that point at a different date, but now in December, and check their math.
Well, that actually obviously is not a textual reading anyway, because the Electoral College is created, and let's look at the text. It says each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress.
So it's fine if the states want to appoint mathematicians. That's okay. Yeah.
No, but the thing is, they meet and they shall vote. There is no provision for direct election of the president in the Constitution, and in theory, that's all beauty contest. In theory, you could run, I guess, if a state wanted to. Say, listen, those two guys running, or two people, a man and woman running for president, that's all nice, well and good. But what we're doing here in our state is we're letting people run to be the elector so they can use their independent judgment to decide who should be president of the United States for us. And people run on their platforms and say whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, some millionaire decides, or billionaire, or 5 billionaires say, I want to be an elector and I'm running a campaign for it, and people vote for them.
Yeah, it's a possibility. Much stronger possibility back then, I guess.
But, no, I mean, you know, I mean, it was a conception of the country that was different. It was states pick the president. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that argument about the Electoral College is the one that is actually textually supportable. It's wrong as a matter of principle. I mean, it's anti-democratic, small d.
Mm-hmm.
And it shouldn't be. I mean, we passed an amendment to call for the direct election of senators, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But we haven't passed one for the direct election of presidents?
I guess not.
And here's the other problem with the Electoral College, which actually I think is if you had a fair-minded Supreme Court, could have legs. You know this because the apportionment of the House of Representatives in particular is done every 10 years by census.
Right.
And the Constitution says that they should be proportional in number. That is, if I have 3 times as many people as you do, I should get 3 times as many representatives as a state, right?
Right.
But it doesn't work that way. I don't know if you know this. Because they've frozen the size of the House of Representatives at 435,
yeah,
there is no true representation that's proportional. People don't talk about that, but the one man, one vote aspect of this is being violated, and there's no constitutional impediment, as there would be for the Senate, which clearly does violate that. But there's no provision in the Constitution for proportional representation of the Senate. It's 2 per state. That's absolutely clear. But the House is different. The House actually provides that it should be.
You know what's interesting? The argument you're making is the reverse of the argument that people made against changing the filibuster rules. You're turning the Senate into the House, freezing the size of the House, which I understand the impetus for. I mean, the size of the House would be unmanageable, but it's unmanageable as it is.
Why would it be unmanageable?
Well, I guess we don't know that it would necessarily be unmanageable. It would just feel like it would be because it would be
because there's more people.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know why that would necessarily be any more or less manageable than.
Yeah, I'm not sure how 800 makes that much difference from 400.
But
I'm a little skeptical of that.
I'd be willing to try at this point, I guess. But yeah, what's essentially happening is by capping the number and then trying to figure out ways of making proportional representation that doesn't leave certain states with 0.
Yeah, because you have to have everybody with at least one. Yeah. That's also in the Constitution.
And that's understandable too. But yeah, now you're turning the House into the Senate. And the Senate was designed to be not be representational by population as a part of the design and bicameral legislature to reach a compromise between those who thought one model was better than the other. So fine, but now you have 2 houses that are unrepresentative, and everyone thought that was the conventional wisdom against filibuster reform is that it would be completely crazy and counter to the intent of the founders, who never contemplated constant filibusters in any case, but it would be counter to the design of the founders to turn the Senate into the House, and no one worries about turning the House into the Senate.
I think that's a very good point, and it's correct. But I also pin it to things that the House is subject to that the Senate is not, and that is the one man, one vote, and that states themselves are subject to.
Mm-hmm.
Baker v. Carr and Reynolds v. Sims established that you can't create districts, voting districts at the state or more local level, and this is true for federal congressional districts. You don't get to do it that way. You can't give less people more representation in the House or in a state government or in a local government. That violates the one man, one vote principle.
Yeah.
And yet, that's what they're doing. That's where we are now. If you look at some of the projections for the 2020 House, they're talking about Rhode Island losing a House seat. This is what really grabbed me. Rhode Island has 1.1 million inhabitants, more or less, I think.
Okay.
You reduce them to 1. Wyoming has 500,000 inhabitants. They have 1.
Yes.
So Wyomingians have twice as much power than Rhode Islanders because they have the same number of representatives, even though they're just one person. I mean, even though they're half the amount of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's true.
That violates Reynolds v. Sims. They have to put in more. Remember, there's no constitutional impediment to increasing the number of members of the House of Representatives. The only numerical restrictions are every state has to have at least 1, and you can't have the number of representatives be represent less than 30,000 people.
Yeah.
Well, now we're talking about 1 representative in Rhode Island representing 1.1 million people. So we've got a lot of room between 1.1 million and 30,000. And you also have 1 representative representing 500,000 people in Wyoming.
Yes.
That's not right. That's unconstitutional is what it is.
So it would appear.
But,
however, getting people to agree to it is another thing. But yeah.
Well, listen, a state like Rhode Island, if this happens, will have standing, in my view, to sue. And claim that the Congress is violating, because I assume it's the Congress that oversees the apportionment of the representatives, right? I mean, I literally don't know, but I assume that's the case.
You know what? I am not certain off the top of my head, but that's something we could probably research off the air to figure out where that comes from.
All right, so you sue the United States of America.
Okay.
Rhode Island versus United States of America.
The proper authority, whoever it might be.
And you say that this is a violation of the one person, one vote clause. The Constitution says every state should have one, but it also says I should look up the language so you can listen to it, so you don't think I'm crazy like Trump.
This is all fake.
This is not Pizzagate, people. This is real.
Now, I do think that I feel like that's been posited in the past, but I mean, it may just be that they've used standing doctrine to say to this point, we don't. This is not a justiciable thing for us.
Well, let me read it to you so you know, because of course this is where the famous 3/5 clause is, or was. It reads, representatives and direct taxes, which is funny, shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers.
Yes.
Among the several states within the union according to their respective numbers. Wyoming has 500,000 and Rhode Island has 1.1 million. If you give each of them 1 representative, you have violated this provision of the Constitution, is my argument.
Yes. Well, I understand it. Yeah, okay. Right, and the only problem is getting, a Supreme Court that, would be willing to touch it, or 2, be willing to do anything other than say, our hands are tied here. Depending on who assigns the numbers and who caps things at 435, offhand, I'm not certain I know for sure exactly where that comes from. I mean, you would want to know so you could know who you wanted to sue, but I
believe it was 1912 where it started, but it is by law, a law created by Congress, and I don't know if they assigned that duty to who does the census, the Treasury Department, right?
You know what? I think that, I guess they do, actually.
I think the Treasury Department does the census. I don't know if that just because they do the census, that means they also do the apportionment. Anyway, I don't know how we got to this. We were talking about crazy Trump, and now you're hearing my crazy constitutional challenges.
Okay. We have to finish
but this is actually straightforward. It's textual. I read you the text.
Department of Commerce.
See, close. Commerce, Treasury, same thing.
Yeah. It's all got money involved.
Linda McMahon's in charge. To get to circle it, yes, she is. To circle back to the craziness of this administration.
No, I think she's Small Business Administration. Commerce is that Wilbur? What's his name? The mining guy?
Wilbur Ross.
Yeah.
Oh, good, even better.
The
vulture guy, unbelievable. Bessie McCoy's ex-husband.
Oh yes.
Yes, you're right. It's Wilbur Ross. 78-year-old Wilbur Ross.
Now, he has some background as a Democratic donor, not the good kind. But
well, he's from New York, and listen, if you guys don't know about New York politics.
Yeah, true, right. Yeah, oh my gosh. Well, if you don't, we should just have David Neer come on the show and for a week. And just
it's as scummy as it gets. It makes New Jersey look nice and clean.
Yeah. That's true. Well, okay, so Department of Commerce oversees the census. But yeah, the real question, I guess, in terms of the justiciability of the issues is who, all right, it does say here the Census Bureau's primary mission is conducting the census, which allocates the seats of the U.S. representatives to the states based on their population. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the Census Bureau dictating to Congress, or even if and
the Census Bureau can't dictate to Congress the number of representatives. That's established by law.
Yeah, you would think that this maybe a report that's usually highly regarded that comes from the Census Bureau is then ratified in Congress by vote. Who simply just says, our tradition is to accept what they say, or not to monkey with it, whatever it is. But my assumption is
there's been arguments about how to do the census. I don't know if you recall. There was this big argument about sampling.
Yes, I definitely remember
issues.
That, which was an early example of, if not right-wing fake news, then certainly it was certainly treated by the right wing as one of those places where you could sow enormous doubt about an important official function of the federal government and encourage people to believe that it was being handled in a corrupt and partisan manner by the party they didn't like. Democrats are in charge of this, therefore it's being done corruptly with the end in mind of warping electoral results and robbing you of power. Therefore, they are foreign agents.
Hey, let me give you a little history on this. Mm-hmm. Okay, first of all, Wikipedia's article is wrong, but
that's another problem.
Yeah, it says the only constitutional rule relating to the size of the House states the number of representatives should not exceed one for every 30,000. That's not true. The other rule is that it shall be chosen by their numbers. But fine. Okay. Everyone seems to forget that. But anyway, the history is the Congress regularly increased the size of the House to account for population growth until it fixed the number of voting House members at 435 in 1911. And then there was a temporary increase in 1959 to permit Alaska and Hawaii to have one representative each. And then they reapportioned it back down to 435 in 1962 after the 60 census. So it's the Congress. I think that means you sue. Do you sue the Congress of the United States? Are they a suable party, or do you sue the United States of America? I'm not sure, but it can be figured out. It's clearly justiciable. The state of Rhode Island, under the hypothetical I just gave you, will have a cause of action. Yeah. And it's not a frivolous one.
No, it's not. It's just a matter of what will courts decide they can and can't do with it, and how much deference do they give to a congressional decision either to keep things capped or to divide things in a certain way. How much interference by the judiciary will they brook? And the answer is probably dictated by, how many members appointed by which party sit on the Supreme Court at that given time. my party will lose out here. Okay, I'm against that.
All right. Yes, exactly. So what we should do is do your January 3rd thing.
Yeah.
File a case immediately. Ask for an expedited review by this Supreme Court.
Yes.
Render a decision. Boom.
Right.
By the time everything's shaken out, we'll have fixed this.
Right. Sound crazy? It's maybe the safest thing you can do because there's no point in the Russians nuking a United States that is in disarray. Unless they think that U.S. in disarray means first launch.
Well, look, you know what? People laugh.
What else are you going to do? Yeah.
Donald Trump's going to be the president. I think all bets are off.
Yeah, maybe.
As to what's reasonable and what that discussion's over. I'm open to any idea at this point.
Okay.
When it comes to trying to control him.
Well.
So, if they could do that, I don't know all the ins and outs of your idea.
No one does.
But hell, try it.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, basically, I know a lot of people have raised a lot of objections, and in particular have asked, have I responded to the guys at the Federalist? No, there's no chance I'm going to be responding to the guys at the Federalist. It's their job to make sure that everybody believes that whatever we might be interested in at Daily Kos is crazy anyway. So what's the point? My audience is inside the Senate. It consists of about perhaps 200 people who know what that stuff is about. And everybody else doesn't need convincing, including the rest of the audience at Daily Kos. Unfortunately, we're short on time. But yeah, for instance, it's certainly no different in this way than what you're proposing here. Do we know whether the issues you've raised are a supportable claim of action? Not when the courts are this political. Do we know that they have standing to bring it? Not when courts are this political. Do we know that there's even good theory behind what you have said? Well, it makes academic sense, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything in a case of first impression like this. It's just been the case that in this country we don't make this complaint because, I don't know, I learned it was 435 when I was in high school, so that's that. These are issues that rise to a level that, again, just like trying to figure out what do we do if the president is crazy? I don't know. Anything you want. Anything you think you can get away with. Same issue when it comes to some parts of constitutional law are just like that. Like I said the other day, and you've said when you've been on talking about it, and Bush v. Gore, when they came with that equal protection claim from the Bush side, nobody in constitutional law anywhere said, yeah, that's a real thing, and it won.
And it was never used again.
Yeah,
so.
Right.
Okay.
So you tell me whether I'm crazy. I don't know. Will it work? I don't know. It won't if you don't do it. I can tell you that. Anyway, we got to wrap up. Thanks for carrying us through the end of the show today. I don't know. I was adrift. And I will be again until we get Greg back, I'm sure. Thanks so much for coming on and helping us out. We got to hand things over to the guys on the after show. And we'll talk to you again probably later in the week. Thanks, Armando.
All right, take care.
Take care. And once again, do stay tuned for everything on the after show. I won't have a chance to wrap up everything that they'll be talking about, but thankfully they'll be on hand to wrap up everything we didn't. That's the function of the after, so make sure you stay tuned and listen.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Now here's a piece of news that they're going to talk about that we really should have talked about with Armando, at least in passing. Colorado is going to join the 21st century and drop its caucuses in favor of primaries. That's not even close to all the stuff they'll be covering on the after show. Make sure you listen. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for hanging in there with us. We'll see you later.